Is original Terminator movie a ripoff? There's a controversy of whether the Terminator's inception is a ripoff. Now, to understand this controversy, we have to look into one of the most talented and most accomplished authors in the field of fiction, Harlan Ellison. He has written a lot for TV shows and films, but nothing beats his amazing short stories, if you ask me. Most of them were action-packed sci-fi. Repent Harley Quinn, said the TikTok man, is the most famous among them, which cannot be skipped from any list that talks the best sci-fi stories ever. Ellison also wrote Star Trek, City on the Edge of Forever, which is arguably the best episode ever. Ellison was equally famous for his temper and abrasiveness. If you go watch the original Terminator now, look closely at the end scene when Sarah Connor drives to the desert, and right up on the screen, before any credits roll out, there are these words: acknowledgement to the works of Harlan Ellison. Well, that doesn't really tell us whether the story of the Terminator has been adapted or a direct ripoff of Ellison's work. But what does acknowledgement mean, really? So the story behind all this controversy goes something like this. Harlan Ellison hears from someone that the Terminator script sounds quite similar to Soldier, an episode of Outer Limits, an American television series that was broadcast on ABC from September 16, 1963 to January 16, 1965. Soldier itself was an adaptation of Soldier Out of Time, which was a short story written by Ellison. Turns out the opening scene of Soldier and the Terminator had an uncanny similarity, where a guy from the future ends up in the 20th century streets. Ellison claims that the production company of the Terminator started avoiding his request to see the script, but he somehow managed to sneak into an advanced screening of the film and came to the conclusion that the Terminator had enough similarities to his work. Now, another spark in this controversy is a statement made by James Cameron himself. In an interview, when asked about his inspiration for the Terminator, he said, "I ripped off a few Outer Limits segments. This was supposed to appear in a magazine called Starlog, but for whatever reason, it never made it in." He also told the same thing to a friend of Ellison's, who visited the set of the Terminator. Well, it's pretty well known that Ellison got around $65,000 from the studio as a settlement. Even if it is true, we cannot say that Ellison owns the idea of time-traveling soldiers. If we think in a David Shields kind of way, Terminator cannot be considered as a ripoff. Ellison himself agrees that the issue is not about intellectual property, but it's one of pride. He said he would have given it for free, if only he had been asked about it. It is understandable, isn't it? If I had written a classic short story and someone made a big budget movie 20 years later with similar scenes, I would definitely be pissed. Now, at the same time, if you were James Cameron, why wouldn't you have asked? Or perhaps all the smoking guns of Cameron saying the word ripoff were meant to be superficial, and he didn't even know what he was using as source material. Indeed, in the printed Starlog interview, Cameron gushes about having read a ton of sci-fi when he was a kid, and that making the Terminator allowed him to come back to sci-fi. It's very possible Cameron didn't even have an encyclopedic knowledge of all the stuff he'd read when he and Gail Ann Hurd wrote The Terminator. It could be that Cameron's idea came from his exposure to sci-fi as a kid, or possibly Ellison actually caught Cameron ripping off his work. Meanwhile, it seems like neither of them can cop to whose idea it was to have time travel be something you do naked. So the next time you see the Terminator's film's credits roll, be on the lookout for the name of your favorite short story writer or two.